podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast with Rich Ferraro.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and it's me, Rich, here, and we're reporting upon Forest's 1-0 defeat at Craven Cottage. If you didn't watch the match, then don't worry, you didn't miss much, and unfortunately for him, but fortunately for us, Tom Newton not only went all the way down to London, he went to see the game and then came home again. And Tom, you must be feeling that was a waste of your time and money.
Yeah, but it's the hope what kills you at the end of the day. We basically lost yet another nailed-on 0-0 game, 1-0 against Fulham, haven't we? There's no quality in the whole game. And yeah, it's just like, too many off days again away from home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also add in there that, you talked about the lack of quality. I think in our group chat, there were a few of us saying last night about, well, you know what, it was a low quality match with low quality officials, low quality, there's nothing that stood out. And in fact, I'm pretty certain the penalty by Raul Jimenez that settled it was pretty much the only actual shot on goal in the entire match.
Yeah, there was a couple of half chances. I mean, Murillo had a long-range effort, which was pretty much bread and butter for Leno. But no, it's just like Anderson had a poor game. The fullbacks had a poor game in my eyes. Hudson-Odoi had a poor game. There's so many. And it's like, we was waxing lyrical last week after the Spurs game. Then it's back to now where it's kind of like, the inconsistency is absolutely killing us at the moment, because 1 minute you're on a high, 1 minute you're on a low. Just, with Sean Dyche's team at the moment, there's no in between. It's like last night, you didn't feel that Forest were basically going to like battle out and try and like get an equaliser. It just like, it was just poor last night. Really was yet again.
Yeah, let's go back to the start then. So you mentioned about players and those who maybe underperformed. So with regards to the actual team news, the main team news was that John Victor was in goals. So Matt Sells was on the bench. Apparently he's not quite 100%, but nonetheless, John kept his place. We had the familiar back four of Savona at right back, Milenkovic, Murillo and Nico Williams at left back. Then the sitting players were Anderson and Douglas Luiz coming in for Ibrahim Sangare. We had the, again, a now familiar three of Hutchinson on the right, Hudson-Odoi on the left, and Gibbs-White playing as the 10 off Igor Jesus. Team news-wise, I don't think anyone would particularly dispute the selection, particularly with the injuries and absences that we're carrying, which probably, I don't know, maybe there's a tale to be told there, because does that mean there's a bit of complacency? Sean Dyche in his post-match interview suggested something along those lines.
Yeah, but like he said in the past, hasn't he? I'm not going to change a winning team. But the only enforced change was obviously Sangare. So I think every Forest fan would have been happy with that team before kick-off last night. But again, it's the performance what's been achieved on the pitch, which is it was below par yet again.
Yeah, and Fulham kind of had a statement of intent right from kickoff. They went down their left-hand side, Forest's right, and particularly in the first half, that was a well-trodden path. They'd obviously decided that with Hutchinson not having much of a physical presence and Nicola Savona being still a Premier League rookie, that they were going to target that. And so we often saw that Anthony Robinson coming forward from left back doubled up with Kevin, and then they tripled up with Smith Rowe pulling across to the left-hand side from the number 10 position. And they were causing poor old Savona quite a lot of problems, weren't they?
Yeah, like you said, first couple of seconds, they targeted that area and they tried to do it all night. And which meant that Hutchinson was coming back to help him out, but then there was no out ball when we actually won the ball, because obviously it was near Savona. So, yeah, they really nullified our wingers and obviously targeted especially Savona. So, to be honest, Marco Silva got his, even though it was a poor game of football, he got his tactics spot on because obviously nullified any threat what we could potentially conjure up.
Yeah, I mean, and in fairness to Marco Silva, he more or less admitted it was a back-to-basics performance in terms of they've had a bit of an iffy run. They've been sort of struggling for consistency themselves, which meant that this was taking on the early signs of potential six-pointer. And yeah, so he went right back to basics. Let's nullify Forest threats. Let's kind of kill the game as much as we can. And then using Kevin as their main outlet down that left-hand side with Robinson as the overlapping fullback. And in fairness, they did it pretty well. And Forest, like you said, because they were having to drop back to do that, it meant there was a real lack of outlet. There were a couple of moments where either Gibbs-White or Hudson-Odoi threatened to cross a halfway line, but it never really got much further than that because there's that lack of support. There wasn't a wave of navy shirts following up to support the attacking players, was there?
It was very reminiscent to the Everton game where we were playing long balls up to Jesus and nobody's within 10, 15 yards of him. And like last night, Gibbs-White, he was non-existent. Hudson-Odoi non-existent. And it's just like, you cannot have games of football, especially in the Premier League, where you're expecting to get something with players with like putting a 5 out of 10 performance. You just cannot do it. And like I said earlier, there's no in between with Forest. We're either good or we're rubbish. It's just, like some teams like they don't play well, but they somehow can carve out like a 1-1 or something like that. We couldn't do that last night. We could be still playing now and wouldn't have scored.
Yeah, and maybe that was summed up by Forest's best, well, the nearest we got to a first half effort on goal, which was the ball came in from the left-hand side. It was actually some nice play, probably the only decent move that Forest put together in the entire match, which was Dougie Luiz, Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi, Nico Williams. Ball came in from the left. Igor Jesus was kind of at the corner, trying to wrap his foot around it and ended up putting the ball high into the stand. He never looked like he was going to get a shot on goal from there, did he?
No, and another thing with Douglas Luiz, so we got into the ground quite early last night just to get, because of obviously the like Christmas shoppers in West London and everything, so I thought I'll get to the ground and actually watch the warm-up. And I watched Douglas Luiz playing like long balls, and he winced a couple of times, and I'm thinking, he doesn't look fit. We know he's got obviously his injury problems, and but when the game started, he was like at the limit. He seemed to be, this is all I can do, and then obviously we'll talk about it in a second in more detail. But with the penalty, that was a player who's not played many minutes, and he thought he could get there, but the body wouldn't let him. And it was a naive challenge, wasn't it, for the penalty? But yeah, I thought Luiz was, he didn't look 100% last night.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, you were obviously at the match, and I was watching it on telly. But he put in one corner, which was almost a Dougie Luiz special from his Villa days, where he almost scored straight from the corner, but Leno and the defence managed to kind of keep it out. Just as an aside on that one, I think the way that Forest put pressure on the corners they did have was absolutely, well, it was non-existent. In those situations, you've got to be having a man on the keeper, and there were too many times when Leno was just able to just gather the ball unchallenged, wasn't there? Yeah,
it was. And you think, well, okay, Forest aren't playing well. They can't make any inroads. The passing was off last night. Anderson's passing was abysmal. There was one late in the game where he tried to ping it to Hutchinson, and it weren't even in the same postcode. And then it was,
and sadly, this was not the first time he'd done that in this match. If you haven't seen the game, listeners, then I'm afraid to say it, if you go back onto social media or YouTube and look up the famous Adama Diakhaby control, then it wasn't a million miles away from that, where it was supposed to be just playing a nice weighted pass, but it basically pinged out of the ground in the corner of the game.
Exactly. Of the field. And then you think, right, okay, we're not playing well. Let's try and put some pressure on set pieces. And the set piece was awful. There was like you just said, no pressure on the keeper. Anderson, he was like when the ball was coming in, no pressure at all. And you're like thinking, just help yourselves. And there's going to be a lot of fans out there who's going to be calling Deitch this and that, because obviously it's how the narrative is with Forest fans at the moment. It's either good or rubbish. And we'll talk about it in a minute about the subs, which I thought the subs were awful. But the players have got to take a long look at themselves. And, like, you know, if, say, Dan O'Doy was playing last night, of how Hudson-Odoi, everybody be on him, because it's Hudson-Odoi, and he scored 2 goals last week. Nobody says anything. But you got to... If the players aren't playing well, you can't like say, "Oh, I'm going to give it to him," but I'm not going to give it to him. You got to be consistent with what we're seeing. And there's some players last night. Well, majority of the players last night, they weren't good. Milenkovic, he got bullied by Raul Jimenez, and it's just like when there's a defeat, you can't keep blaming the manager. The players, when they go over that line, they've got to do something, and they didn't, and they've got to be made accountable.
And I mean, we occasionally do have grumbles about social media, and that, I guess in some ways that's our own fault for spending too much time on social media. But the amount of people who crawl out the woodwork and just kind of say, "See, I was right all along," it's like, it's not about you, pal. This is about the team.
Yeah, there is that. There's like, I've said it for years now. There's people out there who don't say anything when we're winning, but when we're losing, they're like you said, "I told you so," and they seem to be reveling in that. "Oh, I broke the news that."
They'd rather be proven correct than actually have any kind of basis of truth, wouldn't they? Anyway, exactly. Let's come back to the match, and let's come back to Dougie Luiz, because he also had another effort, and this maybe sums up the way that his game was going. Again, he had an opportunity. He was past the ball with space 25 yards out, and his shot was closer to the corner flag than it was to the goal. And then, as you say, when Fulham broke into our box, Kevin did take on a few players. Again, it was targeting Savona. It was that idea of Savona, Hutchinson. Dougie slid in to try and intercept the ball, and then he raked with his... He was on the floor and he raked with his right foot to try and poke the ball away. But in doing so, Kevin got there ahead of him, and it meant that he ended up playing through Kevin's foot. And despite Jamie Carragher's protestations on Sky Sports saying it was a soft penalty, it was a penalty all day. And I think, frankly, Sky, because there's nothing else to talk about in the match, just basically got Carragher to talk about, was this a justifiable award?
Yeah, I mean... With the penalty, it was a penalty. Let's make no bones about it. It definitely was. But I think it's the inconsistencies what annoy fans. Where if that was at the other end, would Forest be given that penalty? I'm not necessarily sure that they would, because if Anthony Taylor then says it's not a penalty, I don't think it's going to be overruled by VAR. But then if you look in the game against Chelsea and Newcastle, where that's an absolute stone wall penalty and wasn't given it. I think it's, like he says, it was definitely.
And of course, Everton didn't get the penalty against Arsenal at the weekend when Saliba basically kicked through Tieno Barry on his way to kicking the ball, which is exactly the same thing. And that was that. I mean, that was a stone wall penalty not given. So in that sense, the offence was the same. And with that one, everyone was saying, that should have been a penalty. This was a similar kind of thing, maybe with less force. But I don't think you could argue, and I accept your point, but I'm certainly not arguing about whether it should or should not have been a penalty. What I will say is that, coming back to your point, the way that Dougie made that challenge suggested that he was, firstly, lacking in match sharpness, and secondly, probably playing through some pain, because that's the kind of thing whereby if you're playing with freedom, you would find there's you'd grow Inspector Gadget legs and be able to kind of poke the ball away before Kevin gets there.
Yeah, we've all done it on a football pitch where you're thinking that I can get there, but then the body doesn't let you, and obviously that goes down to his match fitness, rustiness, whatever. But it was a naive, decision by Dougie Luiz, wasn't it? And and again, Fulham last season at home, they got it was a penalty, but it was very similar, wasn't it? When Murillo, did he tug him back or something like that for the penalty? They've won the game 1-0, where it was an absolute
Dog of a game.
Dog of a game, and it was a nailed on 0-0. And same thing happened last night.
Yeah, and I did actually predict. Basically, when Sky Sports pointed out that Jimenez scored the penalty against Forest in a scrappy 1-0 victory, I turned to Mrs. Farrar and kind of said, it's got a feeling of that again tonight. And then as soon as the penalty was awarded, I was like, yeah, Jimenez never misses. And it's true, he's got 11 out of 11 in the Premier League. He's an absolute beast from the penalty spot. And from there, it meant that we went in 1-0 at half-time.
The 1865 Match Report.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to the 1865 Match Report. It's Rich here with Tom. And Tom, let's just skip ahead a little bit because, again, there's not a huge amount of actual on-pitch action to discuss. Like you mentioned in the first part of this report, there was a nice moment where Murillo had one of his 30-yarders, and it was one of those things where I was desperately hoping that him taking the initiative, as we've seen on occasions before, might just spark a bit of life into the Reds. And it looked like it might happen because a minute later, Morgan Gibbs-White had an effort also from distance which just flashed past the far post. But that was it, wasn't it? And to come back to something you mentioned earlier, subs, we had absolutely nothing off the bench that could improve things. And in fact, the subs... let's just say that the subs made no positive impact.
The subs were so strange. It's like, if you look at Taiwo's stats, he touched the ball 3 times and 2 of them were offside. So that goes to show you he's not match fit. And it's quite telling, isn't it? With him getting more minutes than Kali Mwendo. And Kali Mwendo is, in the last 2 Europa League games, he scored 2 goals. And he gets, 6 minutes last night when he comes on in the 90th minute. McAtee, he's another one where, if you read John Percy's piece, they've got high expectations of him, and he comes on and does nothing. And then he brings Dominguez on, and it's like, we all love Dominguez, but he's not going to take the game by the scruff of its neck and obviously create something. And
so you mentioned there about Callum Mwendo. So it's a triple substitution. So we saw Luiz, Gibbs-White and Jesus go off. And we saw Dominguez, McAtee and Awonyi come on. So you've mentioned Callum Mwendo. What would you have done? Because obviously Luiz couldn't keep going. Morgan, we don't know about that, if that was a tactical or a fitness thing. But we knew that Dougie had to come off. So what would you have done differently?
I would have put... if Back was fit enough to be on the bench, I would have played him and took either Hutchinson or Hudson-Odoi off. Mm-hmm. And I would have kept Jesus on and put Kali Mwendo up with him, because you're getting a goal at the end of the day. You don't need to bring McAtee on, for example. Mm-hmm. I would have gone a bit more basic and try and change the wingers. And you know what? I would have probably put Zinchenko in midfield and get him on the ball for Luiz. I know we all know he's got his limitations as a left back, Zinchenko. And then I would have put Baku on if he's fit enough to be on the bench, and I would have put Kali Mwendo up front with Jesus. And at least you can look yourself in the mirror and say, we've had a go. But to bring Awonyi on, we're relying on him from 2 years ago, and we all know he's done. Unfortunately for him.
What I would say is, that Taiwo has shown glimpses of being the old Taiwo, but then he got injured again. So I can understand some of the reasoning, but I also accept what you're saying. I think the trouble with Callum Mwendo, as we're all aware of, And, this is part of the same problem that Eagles had up front, which is that playing in the Premier League is a very different beast to playing in the Europa League. Callum Owendo has got that smaller build, lower centre of gravity, more kind of able to thrive in the kind of space you get when you're playing in Europe. And that's why because Igor still, although he's very, very good playing as a kind of a hold-up forward in the Premier League, we saw on 2 or 3 occasions last night that sometimes he needs an extra touch, and Premier League defenders will not allow you that time and space to do that. So, yeah, I can see some of the logic, but I also see the logic in what you're saying. Just for the record as well, Zinchenko did come on and he played at left back with Williams moving to right back with 10 minutes to go. So Savona was put out of his misery, frankly. And we did see Callum Owendo coming on, but that was in stoppage time, and I don't think he even had a touch of the ball.
No. And you'd know by, 60 minutes that, come on, we need to change it. Let's get... The fans were good last night, atmosphere-wise. They tried to get behind the team, but we're just, at the moment, especially away from home, I know we won a few weeks ago against Liverpool, but we're not getting anything back, and it's just like, we just want something to happen, and you just knew it was one of those games, when you look at the clock and you think, oh, say 55 minutes is gone, and you're thinking, you'll look at the clock in a minute, and it'd be like 78 minutes, and the game just ebbs away and nothing's happened. Same thing happened last night, and they kept us at arm's length. And like I said earlier, we're just not good enough. And like that Gattuso interview a few years ago, we're either good or we're rubbish. There's no in between, and that's
yes.
so frustrating.
And for those of you on social media, you may have seen us retweet Tom sharing that, and let's just say rubbish was not the word that Gattuso used. And sure enough, I mean, Marco Silva did say he had every right to be happy because effectively Fulham, kind of the last 20 minutes, they controlled the game, and it became very apparent after the subs were made, and this included Fulham bringing on Tom Kearney for Sander Berge. It's an interesting one, that, because Berge was tasked with marking Gibbs-White. He got a yellow card, and so they went for a slightly different tactical approach, which was bringing Kearney on to have a little bit more ability to kind of control the ball rather than try and control Gibbs-White. And that kind of meant that Fulham were never in any real danger after about the 70-minute mark. And Marco Silva did say, we scored it's an important moment of the game. The second half, we did manage well. I can't remember one chance from Forest. And as we said, the nearest things we had to a chance was the Murillo 30-yarder, which did move in the air, and Leno had to juggle a bit, but ultimately it was a relatively comfortable save.
Yeah, and another thing from Forest is like, they missed a massive chance last night, because if they would have just got a point, it stops, obviously, Fulham creeping away from them. Yeah. But now it's like, if you look at the games, what we've got, there's a lot of hard games coming up. Obviously, we've got the Villa, we've got West Ham, Everton, Man City, etc. But there's no intensity in the game whatsoever from Forest, and it looked like Forest have had a midweek game, not Fulham, last night in certain aspects of the game. And Marco Silva, like I said, he got his tactics spot on. He just kept us at arm's length, and we just didn't have a plan B last night.
Yep. Hold that thought then, Tom, because what we're going to do is we're going to hear a view from the opposition, and we are going to hear now from Sam from Fulham Focus.
Hello, 1865. This is Sam Dymond from the Fulham Focus podcast. And never mind relegation fears, my biggest worry was how I was going to fill 3 minutes of chat as this game approached half-time. But in first half stoppage time came the night's decisive moment when we were awarded a penalty following some classic Kevin chaos where he displayed skill, pace and then terrible decision-making. However, he was alert to regain the ball and then clever to throw himself to the ground when contact was made. On the award itself, I would not be happy if it was given against us, and it has been many times in the past. But Douglas Luiz does kick through Kevin's boot, and he was sure to make the most of it. Raul Jimenez has come in for a lot of criticism lately from our fans. At 34, he's our only fit senior striker, and he's playing far more minutes than he should be, many of them incredibly deep in some kind of bizarre central midfield role. But while he can't always be relied upon in an attack in the area sense, he is deadly from the spot. And so I never had any doubt when he stepped up to take that penalty. He's 11 from 11 now in the Premier League, which is the league's joint best 100% record, along with Yaya Toure. While the penalty was a huge surprise, it was our first since January, the fact that it emanated down our left was not. After surgery on a knee injury, we weren't expecting to see Anthony Robinson until well into the new year, but he was surprisingly thrown straight into the team at Burnley last weekend, kept his place at Newcastle in the Carabao Cup, and then started again tonight. He still seems rusty, particularly defensively, but he has been so important to our dominant left-hand side over the past couple of seasons, and it's something we've had to work around with him out so far this campaign. For the first time tonight, there were signs that a partnership with Kevin could blossom into something really promising in the future. Otherwise, it had been a first half that I had expected, with us seeing plenty of the ball, playing some tidy enough stuff, but lacking any cutting edge in the final third. The fact that Forest looked the more dangerous team on the break with the pace of Hudson-Odoi and Hutchinson was really no surprise, and I'm thankful that Igor Jesus is still finding his feet in the Premier League, even if he could have rocked me up my FPL mini-league tonight by scoring a couple. The second half was a different affair though, and I couldn't believe we sat off right from the restart, inviting pressure. Had Forest equalised, it would have been exactly what both teams deserved, and I was waiting for the inevitable to happen. And that was until the introduction of Nottingham-born Tom Cairney, our man from a family of Forest fans. With his introduction, we regained control in the middle of the pitch, and the influence of Morgan Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson diminished until the former was substituted and the other angled one too many crossfield balls out of play. At that point, I knew it was going to be our night. Finally, a word for Anthony Taylor, and that word is I thought he was just awful for both teams, and 9 yellow cards in a match with just 14 fouls was a nonsense. My personal favourite moment was when he missed a clear foul on a Forest player attempting to hold the ball up on halfway, only for us to break and see a Cairney shot tipped around the post by John Victor for a goal kick. All in all, it was far from a classic, but it's a huge 3 points for us because I had serious concerns about our run of fixtures after Christmas. But moving 10 clear of the relegation zone at this stage of the season brings some comfort and joy. Ultimately, though, I think both Fulham and Forest will be fine at the end of the season and will end up battling it out for 15th and 16th place. And with that, happy Christmas and good luck on your European adventure.
The 1865 Match Report.
Step into a world of luxury in a Juniper Villa apartment at Shenandoah Valley, Westminster, Canterbury, Northern Virginia's finest life plan community. Picture this: your new home features open floor plans, soaring ceilings, and designer finishes. Enjoy scenic walking paths, an indoor pool, an art studio, and exceptional dining options. And with our Life Care contract, your future is secure. Hurry, limited villa apartments are available, and with rates set to rise in 2026, lock in 2025 rates today. Schedule your tour at svwc.org/luxuryliving.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to 1865. It's Rich here with Tom. And Tom, firstly, I think going back to what Sam had to say just before the break there, very fair views, and it does bring on something that I didn't want to have to talk about, but we do have to mention. I mean, it really says something when both sets of fans are really, really peed off with the referee. And that moment that Sam recounted, I mean, it's such a forgettable match. I almost forgot about this. But yeah, a Forest player is clearly fouled on the halfway line. Fulham break. Cairney has the shot. John actually makes a good save, tips it around the post, and the referee gives a goal kick to Forest. And that sums up the competence. And going back to where we started this match report, I put in the group chat, a poor quality game with a poor quality ref.
I'm not surprised with Anthony Taylor anymore. It's like everything I see, it's like, well, it's Anthony Taylor, so I don't expect anything different. There was one where we created a decent opening, and he managed to get his fat arse in the way of a Elliot Anderson pass, and it was going straight to Hudson-Odoi, and we really opened them up. But obviously, the ball has to come back. They get the 11 men behind the ball, and obviously that opportunity is gone. And then there was one where...
what you can't see, though, Tom, is that he was laughing his head off about it. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And, of course, the chant is, Anthony Taylor, it's all about you. Just saying.
Yeah, and he was called to see you next Tuesday as well, by 28,000 or whatever it is at Fulham.
Merry Christmas, Anthony.
Yeah, but there was another one where the ball was like loose in midfield. And Elliot Anderson was going to get the ball and would have had control of it. He gets in the way. Anderson hesitates. They get the ball, and it's a chance on goal. And you're thinking, you're just an absolute hindrance of the game. It really is.
And of course, we remember the ones that go against us because that's the nature of being a football fan. But it is worth coming back to what Sam said and what I said, which is that he was terrible for both teams. It had no bearing on the result. It's just that this guy is supposedly England's top referee, and if that's the best we have to offer, then that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And also, when we played Everton a few years ago, when we lost 2-0, after the infamous tweet. Hudson-Odoi, he got was challenged by Ashley Young, and he was quite adamant it was no penalty, but it was very similar contact to the one on Kevin last night, and that was given. So I know it's like 2 or 3 years down the line or whatever, but it's still Anthony Taylor, and you just know when he was announced as a referee, he had his way of. I know we wasn't good enough last night, and I'm not saying he was the reason why we lost the game, but he was going to have a massive say.
All I'm going to say is that when there's 9 yellow cards in a match which was of very little consequence, nothing really happened, and the majority of those yellow cards were not for fouls, they were not for indiscretions, handballs, that kind of stuff, they were for dissent, then what's the common theme there? That's all I'm going to say about it.
Exactly, it's been poor for both sides.
So you mentioned about what it does to the table. Of course, it gives Fulham a bit of daylight. Fulham move up to 13th position on 23 points. Forest remain just outside the relegation zone on 17th on 18 points. Just to close up, Sean Dyche did say in his post-match interview, he echoed the kinds of thoughts that we thought he would, which was that we weren't good enough. He also echoed that idea about, when you choose a winning team and they don't kind of... they don't pull their weight, then that's a concern, and we need to find that consistency. We never really threatened. We didn't have any kind of threat when we got into the final third, and I don't think it's a particularly good game, but you have to get something from it, and we weren't able to. One last thing from you on this one, Tom. Dyche was looking really peed off at the final whistle, and he ran straight down the tunnel. Were you, as an away fan who'd spent a lot of your time and money to get to that game, were you annoyed with him for doing that?
Yeah, I was, but he's done it. He's done it a lot of the times. I mean, we got there to Craven Cottage last night, and the players just went in and didn't really acknowledge anybody. And I think Sean Dyche he's that kind. He doesn't like all that, like with the Steve Cooper and things like that. And so I think he's just how he is. He's just like, right, it's a business. Just get down the tunnel kind of thing. But yeah, he did mention us in the post-match, didn't he? So
yeah,
obviously he's acknowledged us rather than say Ange never acknowledged us in his 40 days. So no, I'm not going to take too much out of what he has or hasn't done or anything. But yeah, I think he knows that we're annoyed as a fan base that we're putting that performance and. Yeah, there's no two ways of saying it, is there? We weren't good enough last night.
Yep. Okay. Well, I'm going to say a big thank you, Tom, for joining us, taking time out after a long old journey and a late arrival back in Nottingham last night. And thank you also, listener, for joining us. Thank you, Sam, for joining us from Fulham Focus. And there is one more treat for you before we hit the big day. And that is tomorrow on Christmas Eve, we will be presenting part 2 of our Festive Terrorist show, which features our Christmas quiz. And let's just say it's a little bit chaotic, but in a good way. A bit like when you're watching Forest at their best, trying to attack with the riches of Gibbs, White and Hudson-Odoi and Hutchinson and Jesus. We didn't get that last night, so if you want some chaos in your feeds, then join us for Festive Terrorists Part 2. And if you don't manage to do that before Santa comes to visit, just want to say thank you very much. We've done over 50 podcasts already this season, and it wouldn't be worth doing it if you weren't listening. So we wish you a very merry and peaceful Christmas.
Merry Christmas all.
You've been listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps other listeners find our content.
Military service runs deeper than a single person. It's about family. At American Public University, we recognize that connection. Our preferred military rate, which extends to parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents, is just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level tuition. American Public University. Education that celebrates military families. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.